The neon sign of Tucker's Bar flickered against the ink-black Texas sky, casting red and blue shadows across the gravel parking lot. Inside, the Friday night crowd had thinned to just a handful of regulars nursing their last drinks, and one man who'd had far more than his last. Garrett McAllister sat at the end of the bar, his Stetson pushed back on his head, his weathered hands wrapped around an empty whiskey glass. Even slouched on that bar stool, he cut an impressive figure, 6'3" of lean muscle, shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway, with salt and pepper hair that somehow made him look distinguished rather than old. At 42, he was the kind of man who turned heads wherever he went, though he seemed entirely unaware of it. I'd been watching him from my booth in the corner for the last hour, nursing a beer I didn't really want and pretending to review inventory reports on my tablet. Watching Garrett McAllister had become something of a guilty habit over the past 3 years. I'd worked as ranch manager at the Double M, the sprawling cattle operation he'd inherited from his father. It was a habit I knew was foolish, maybe even dangerous, but one I couldn't seem to break. "Jake," Tucker called from behind the bar, jerking his head toward Garrett. "Your boss is about 3 sheets to the wind. Somebody's gonna need to drive him home." I looked up from my tablet, feigning surprise, as if I hadn't been acutely aware of every drink Garrett had ordered since he'd stumbled in around 9 o'clock. "Where's his truck?" "Out front, keys are here." Tucker held up a ring with a worn leather fob stamped with the Double M brand. He had the good sense to hand them over about an hour ago, said something about Melissa. "You know anything about that?" My chest tightened. Melissa, Garrett's ex-wife. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, but the wounds were clearly still fresh. In the 3 years I'd known him, I'd watched Garrett's marriage slowly disintegrate, the long silences, the separate bedrooms, the way Melissa would show up at the ranch less and less frequently until she stopped coming at all. "They signed the final papers this week," I said quietly. "Division of assets." Tucker shook his head. "That'll do it. Well, somebody needs to get him home. I'm closing up in 20 minutes." I closed my tablet and slid out of the booth, my heart doing something complicated in my chest. 3 years of working side by side with Garrett McAllister, 3 years of keeping my feelings locked down tight, and now I was going to drive him home while he was drunk and vulnerable. This seemed like a spectacular bad idea. But what choice did I have? I crossed the worn wooden floor and took the stool beside him. Up close, I could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his jaw was tight even in his current state. Garrett McAllister was a proud man, the kind who held everything inside until it had nowhere to go but down. "Hey, boss," I said softly. He turned to look at me, and those green eyes, the color of summer grass after rain, focused on my face with difficulty. "Jake." He said my name like it was a question and an answer at the same time. "What are you doing here?" "Having a beer, same as you." "I'm not having a beer." He lifted his empty glass. "I'm having whiskey, had whiskey, past tense." He set the glass down with exaggerated care. Words are hard. Despite everything, I smiled. "Yeah, they get that way after a bottle of Jack Daniels. Come on, let me drive you home." "Don't need a ride." But even as he said it, he swayed on the stool. "Sure you don't, but humor me anyway." I stood and held out my hand. For a long moment, Garrett just looked at it, my hand suspended between us in the dim bar light. Then he took it, and the warmth of his palm against mine sent electricity straight up my arm. I helped him to his feet, steadying him when he wobbled. "Okay, maybe I need a little help," he admitted. Tucker had already come around the bar with Garrett's jacket. Together, we got him into it, though he seemed to have forgotten how sleeves worked. Out in the parking lot, the November air was sharp and cold, carrying the scent of hay and cattle from the surrounding ranches. Garrett's truck was a big black Ford F-350, the kind of vehicle that suited him perfectly, powerful, practical, and intimidating. I helped him into the passenger seat, then walked around to the driver's side. The truck smelled like him, leather, sage, and something indefinably masculine that made my hands tighten on the steering wheel. The Double M Ranch was 20 miles outside of town, a winding drive through hill country that was beautiful in daylight and treacherous at night. I took it slow, hyper-aware of Garrett beside me, his head resting against the window, his eyes closed. For the first 15 miles, he didn't say anything. I thought maybe he'd fallen asleep. Then, just as we turned onto the long dirt road that led to the main house, he spoke. "You ever feel like you wasted your whole life, Jake?" The question hit me like a physical blow. I kept my eyes on the road, watching the headlights cut through the darkness. "Sometimes," I said carefully. "I'm 42 years old," he continued, his voice rough. "Married the girl I was supposed to marry, built the ranch my father wanted me to build, did everything right, followed all the rules." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And here I am, divorced, alone, wondering what the hell it was all for." "You built something incredible," I said. "The Double M is one of the most successful ranches in 3 counties. You should be proud." "Should be," he turned his head to look at me, and even in the darkness of the truck cab, I could feel the weight of his gaze. "But I'm not. You want to know why?" Every instinct told me to change the subject, to deflect, to protect myself from whatever he was about to say, but I couldn't. "Why?" "Because I built it all for the wrong reasons. Because I spent 20 years pretending to be someone I'm not. Because—" He stopped abruptly, as if he'd caught himself on the edge of saying too much. The main house came into view, a sprawling ranch-style structure with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. I pulled up to the front, killed the engine, and sat in the sudden silence. "Because what?" I asked quietly. Garrett didn't answer. Instead, he fumbled with his seatbelt, cursing softly when it wouldn't release. I reached over to help him, my hand brushing his, and he went very still. "Jake," he said, my name barely above a whisper. "Yes." He turned toward me, and suddenly we were close. So close I could see the silver stubble on his jaw, smell the whiskey on his breath, count every line around his eyes. Those eyes were focused on me now with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "I need to tell you something," he said, "something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "You're drunk, boss. Maybe this should wait until—" "No," he reached up, and before I could process what was happening, his hand was on my cheek, rough and warm and impossible. "No more waiting. I've waited too damn long already." Time seemed to suspend itself. In that moment, sitting in the darkness of his truck with his hand on my face, everything I'd carefully locked away for 3 years came rushing to the surface. All the stolen glances, the accidental touches, the nights I'd lain awake thinking about things I had no right to think about. "Garrett," I breathed. "I'm tired, Jake." His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I nearly came undone. "I'm so tired of pretending, of lying, of being scared." He leaned closer, and I could feel the heat of him, the solid presence that had haunted my dreams. "The truth is, I didn't marry Melissa because I loved her. I married her because I was supposed to, because it was easier than admitting." "Admitting what?" The words came out strangled. "That I've never been attracted to women. Not really, not the way I'm supposed to be." His eyes searched mine, desperate and afraid and achingly vulnerable. "That every time you walk into a room, I forget how to breathe. That I've spent 3 years watching you and wanting you and hating myself for it." The world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be happening. Garrett McAllister, my boss, the man I'd convinced myself was as straight as they came, was telling me he wanted me. "You're drunk," I said, but my voice shook. "You don't know what you're saying." "I'm drunk enough to finally say it," he countered, "but I'm not so drunk I don't mean it." His other hand came up to frame my face, holding me like I was something precious. "Jake Harper, I have been falling for you since the day you showed up at my ranch with dirt on your boots and determination in your eyes, and I'm done pretending I don't." For one perfect, terrifying moment, I let myself believe it. Let myself imagine what it would be like to close the distance between us, to kiss him the way I'd imagined 1,000 times. But reality crashed back in, cold and unforgiving. "You're going through a divorce," I said, pulling back even though it physically hurt. "You're emotional and drunk and processing a lot of things. This isn't real." Something that looked like hurt flashed across his face. "Jake." No, I opened my door, desperate for air, for space, for anything that would help me think straight. Come on, let's get you inside. I came around to his side and helped him out of the truck. He was unsteady on his feet, and I had to wrap an arm around his waist to keep him upright. Even through my confusion and fear, I was painfully aware of the solid warmth of him against my side, the way his arm draped over my shoulders. We made it up the porch steps and into the house. The entry hall was dark except for a single lamp Garrett always left on. I'd been in this house dozens of times for business, but never like this, never at night, never alone with him, never with his confession hanging in the air between us. "Bedroom's upstairs," he mumbled, leaning heavily against me. I half-carried, half-walked him up the staircase and down the hallway to the master bedroom. It was a large room with exposed beams, a stone fireplace, and a king-sized bed covered in a dark blue quilt. I eased him down onto the edge of the bed and knelt to pull off his boots. "Jake," he said as I worked on the second boot, "I meant what I said." "I know you think you did." I set his boots aside and stood. "But tomorrow, when you're sober, you're going to regret this conversation, and I need to work for you, which means we both need to forget it happened." He caught my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for someone who could barely stand. "What if I don't want to forget?" I looked down at him, this beautiful, complicated man who just turned my world inside out, and felt something crack in my chest. "Then I'll have to find another job," I said quietly, "because I can't do this, Garrett. I can't be your experiment or your rebound or whatever this is." "It's not," he struggled to find words. "You're not." "Get some sleep." I pulled free from his grasp, gentle but firm. "I'll leave your truck keys on the kitchen counter." I made it to the doorway before he spoke again. "I love you." 3 words, simple and devastating. I froze, my hand on the doorframe, everything in me screaming to turn around, to go back, to take what he was offering, even if it was wrapped in whiskey and heartbreak. "You don't," I said without turning around, "but I wish you did." I walked down the stairs, through the house, and out into the cold November night. Only when I was in my own truck, driving down the long dirt road away from the Double M Ranch, did I let myself fall apart. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch in my small apartment above the foreman's cottage, watching the sun come up over the hills and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Part of me, a large part, wanted to believe every word Garrett had said, wanted to believe that his feelings were real, that I hadn't spent 3 years nursing a hopeless crush on a straight man. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me safe and employed for 3 years, knew better. Garrett McAllister was going through a crisis. His marriage had ended, he was questioning everything about his life, and he'd latched onto me as some kind of answer. People did that when they were lost. They looked for anything solid to hold onto, and I happened to be convenient. By the time the sun was fully up, I'd convinced myself that the best thing to do was quit. Pack up my things, find another ranch to manage, and put as much distance between myself and Garrett as possible. It would hurt like hell, but it would be cleaner than staying and watching him realize he'd made a mistake. I was just starting to draft a resignation email when my phone rang. I looked at the screen and felt my stomach drop. "Garrett." I let it go to voicemail. Then I sat there, staring at my phone, waiting for the notification. When it came, I listened to the message with my heart in my throat. "Jake," his voice was rough, probably from the whiskey, definitely from whatever he was feeling. "I know you're probably avoiding me and I don't blame you, but I need you to know something. I'm sober now, painfully sober, and I meant every word I said last night." There was a pause and I could hear him breathing. "I'm not asking you to quit. I'm not asking you for anything, actually. I needed you to know the truth, that's all." The message ended. I sat there for a long time, phone in hand, trying to make sense of the emotion in his voice. He'd sounded scared, vulnerable, and absolutely sincere. I called him back before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the first ring. "Jake." "I'm coming over," I said. "We need to talk." "Okay." The line went dead. I grabbed my keys and headed out. The drive to the main house felt longer than usual, every mile giving me time to second-guess my decision. What was I going to say? What did I want from this conversation? What could I possibly expect to come from it? But when I pulled up to the house and saw Garrett standing on the porch, showered, shaved, dressed in clean jeans and a flannel shirt, looking simultaneously like he'd been hit by a truck and like the most handsome man I'd ever seen, all my carefully prepared speeches evaporated. I got out of my truck and walked up the porch steps. We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other in the morning light. "Coffee," he offered finally. "Yeah, coffee would be good." Inside, the house smelled like fresh brewed coffee and bacon. Garrett led me to the kitchen, where he'd clearly been stress cooking. There were pancakes on a plate, bacon on a paper towel, eggs in a pan. It was more food than one person could eat in a week. "Couldn't sleep," he said, catching my look. "Figured I might as well be productive." He poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one. Our fingers brushed in the exchange, and I saw him inhale sharply. So he felt it too, that electric current that had always run between us. We stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, holding our coffee mugs like shields. "So," Garrett said finally, "I'm sure you have questions." "About 100 of them." I took a sip of coffee to steady myself, but I guess the main one is, how long have you known? He looked down at his mug. "About you specifically, about 3 years, about myself." He laughed softly, bitterly. "Probably my whole life, if I'm honest. I just got really good at not thinking about it." "Your marriage was a mistake." He looked up, meeting my eyes. "Not because Melissa isn't a wonderful woman. She is. But I married her for all the wrong reasons, because it was expected. Because my father wanted me to produce an heir and carry on the McAllister name. Because I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I just followed the script, these feelings would go away. And they didn't." "No," his voice was barely above a whisper. "They didn't. And then you showed up, looking for work, and I hired you even though we already had a ranch manager because I couldn't let you walk away. And every day since then has been torture." I set down my coffee mug with shaking hands. "Why didn't you say something?" "Because I'm a coward." The self-loathing in his voice was painful to hear. "Because I was married. Because I was terrified. Because small-town Texas isn't exactly progressive, and I have a business to run and a reputation to maintain. Because," his voice broke, "because I didn't want to lose you, and I thought if I said anything, you'd leave." "Garrett," I walked around the island until I was standing right in front of him. "I need you to understand something. I've had feelings for you since the moment I met you. But I convinced myself you were straight, that nothing could ever happen, and I made my peace with that. I stayed because working for you, being near you even when I couldn't have you, was better than leaving." His eyes widened. You have feelings for me." "Of course I do." The words came out rough, torn from somewhere deep. "How could I not? You're brilliant and kind and frustrating and beautiful. You're everything I've ever wanted and everything I knew I couldn't have. So yeah, I have feelings for you, but that doesn't mean this is a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because you just got divorced. Because you're just figuring out who you are, and I don't want to be an experiment or a phase or something you regret when you're thinking clearly." Garrett set down his own mug and took a step closer. "Jake, I am thinking clearly. More clearly than I have in 20 years. Yes, I'm your boss, and we'll need to figure out how that works. Yes, I just got divorced, but that marriage was over long before the papers were signed. And as for figuring out who I am," he reached up, hesitated, then gently touched my face the same way he had in the truck. "I've known who I am. I've just been too scared to admit it, but I'm done being scared." I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch despite every warning bell in my head. "What are you asking for, Garrett?" "A chance," he said simply. "That's all. Just a chance to see if this thing between us is as real as I think it is. We'll take it slow. We'll be careful. But please, Jake, please don't walk away because you're trying to protect me from myself. Let me make my own choices." I opened my eyes and found him watching me with an expression that made my knees weak, hope and fear, and want all mixed together. "This could blow up in our faces," I said. "I know. People will talk. Let them. You could lose friends, clients. Then they weren't real friends, and I'll find new clients. He stepped even closer until there were only inches between us. Jake, I've spent my entire life living for other people, doing what was expected, saying what was acceptable, being who they needed me to be. And I'm done. I want to live for myself. And if I'm lucky enough that you'll let me, I want to live for you too. The last of my resistance crumbled. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we'd crash and burn. But standing there in his kitchen, with morning light streaming through the windows and his hand warm against my cheek, I couldn't bring myself to care. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." "Yeah," I reached up and covered his hand with mine. "Okay, we can try this. But we do it right, Garrett. We communicate, we're honest. And if at any point you realize you've made a mistake." "I won't." "But if you do, you tell me. No dragging it out. No martyring yourself for my sake. Deal?" "Deal." His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I shivered. "Can I kiss you now? Because I've been dying to kiss you for 3 years, and if I have to wait another second, I might actually lose my mind." I answered by closing the distance between us. The first touch of his lips against mine was electric, soft and tentative and perfect. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved, both of us frozen in the disbelief that this was actually happening. Then Garrett made a soft sound in the back of his throat and deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into my hair, the other wrapping around my waist and pulling me against him. I'd imagined this moment countless times, but nothing compared to the reality. He tasted like coffee and something uniquely him. He kissed like a man who'd been starving and had finally found food, desperate and grateful and consuming. I kissed him back with 3 years of pent-up longing, my hands fisting in his shirt, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Garrett rested his forehead against mine. "Jesus," he breathed. "Yeah, that was. I know." We stood there holding each other in his kitchen while the sun climbed higher in the sky and the bacon got cold on the counter. Eventually, I pulled back far enough to look at him. "So," I said, "what now?" A slow smile spread across his face, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. Now we eat breakfast, and then we figure out how to run a ranch when all I want to do is kiss you senseless. And then," he paused, suddenly uncertain, "then we take it one day at a time and see where this goes, if that's okay with you." "That's more than okay with me." I kissed him again, quick and sweet. "But you're right about one thing, we should eat, because I have a feeling we're going to need our strength." His eyes darkened with heat and promise. "Jake Harper, are you flirting with me?" "Maybe. Is it working?" "Oh, it's working." He kissed me once more, lingering this time. "It's definitely working." The next few weeks were a study in contrasts, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. During the day, we were boss and ranch manager, working side by side to run the Double M just as we always had. But now there were stolen moments, a touch that lasted too long, a glance that held promises, the brush of his hand against mine as we examined a fence line or reviewed cattle weights. At night, once the ranch hands had gone home and it was just the two of us, we'd meet at the main house. Sometimes we'd cook dinner together, navigating around each other in the kitchen with the comfortable awkwardness of people learning each other's rhythms. Sometimes we'd sit on the porch with cold beers, talking about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our dreams, the thousand small details that make up a life. And sometimes we'd end up tangled together on his couch or in his bed, learning the geography of each other's bodies with the intensity of explorers charting new territory. Garrett was different than I'd imagined, softer in some ways, harder in others. He was surprisingly vulnerable when we were alone, willing to talk about his fears and insecurities in a way that made my chest ache. The dissolution of his marriage had left scars, not because he missed Melissa romantically, but because it represented the failure of a 20-year performance. He'd spent so long trying to be the man everyone expected that he wasn't entirely sure who he really was underneath. "Sometimes I feel like I'm playing dress-up," he admitted one night as we lay in his bed, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. "Like I'm trying on this new identity and waiting for someone to tell me I'm doing it wrong." You're not playing dress up, I said, pressing a kiss to his collarbone. You're just finally being honest about who you've always been. How do you know? I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. Because of the way you kiss me, the way you touch me, the way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. That's not performance, Garrett, that's real. He pulled me down for a kiss that proved my point emphatically. But it wasn't all easy. There were moments when the reality of our situation crashed in, when we were out in public and had to maintain a careful distance, when ranch hands made casual homophobic comments not knowing they were standing next to two gay men, when Garrett's friends from his married life would call and he'd have to decide how much to tell them. The first real test came about a month in, when Garrett's father showed up unannounced. I was in the office going over supply orders when I heard the truck pull up. Looking out the window, I recognized the silver Dodge Ram that belonged to Samuel McAllister, the patriarch who'd built the Double M into what it was today and who'd retired to Arizona 5 years ago after Garrett's mother died. "Shit," I muttered. Garrett looked up from the desk where he'd been reviewing breeding records. "What? Your dad's here." All the color drained from Garrett's face. "Now. Now." Samuel McAllister was a force of nature, a self-made man who'd built his ranch through sheer determination and expected everyone around him to live up to his exacting standards. He was the reason Garrett had married Melissa, the reason he'd spent 20 years denying who he was. And from what Garrett had told me, Samuel's views on anything outside traditional masculinity were firmly rooted in the previous century. "Maybe I should go," I said, already moving toward the door. "No," Garrett stood, squaring his shoulders. "No, stay, I'm done hiding." My heart was pounding as heavy footsteps sounded on the porch, followed by a sharp knock. Garrett walked to the door and opened it. "Dad." "Son," Samuel McAllister stepped inside, bringing with him the smell of expensive cologne and leather. He was an older version of Garrett, same height, same build, though his hair had gone completely white and his face bore the deep lines of a man who'd spent his life squinting against the sun. His eyes swept the office and landed on me. "Jake." "Mr. McAllister," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Heard you and Melissa finally signed the papers," Samuel said to Garrett, his tone neutral. "Thought I'd drive up and see how you're holding up." "I'm fine," Garrett said. "Better than fine, actually." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "That's so." There was a long pause. I could see Garrett wrestling with something, could practically hear the gears turning in his head. This was the moment. He could deflect, change the subject, maintain the comfortable fiction a little while longer, or he could tell the truth. "Dad," Garrett said finally, "there's something I need to tell you. If this is about the divorce. I already told you, I thought that woman was too high maintenance. It's not about the divorce. Well, it is, but not the way you think." Garrett took a deep breath, and I saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. "The reason my marriage fell apart is because I'm gay. I've always been gay, and I'm done pretending I'm not." The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel stood frozen in the middle of the office, staring at his son like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. I wanted to say something, do something, but this wasn't my moment. This was between them. "You're what?" Samuel said finally. "Gay. I'm gay, Dad. I like men. I've always liked men. I married Melissa because that's what you wanted, what everyone expected, but it wasn't fair to her and it wasn't fair to me. So I'm done. I'm done living a lie." Samuel's face had gone red. "This is some kind of delayed midlife crisis. You're confused because your marriage ended." "I'm not confused." Garrett's voice was steady now, stronger. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life, and if you can't accept that, if you can't accept me, then I'm sorry. But I'm not changing who I am, not anymore." Samuel looked at me then, and I saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "And him, Jake, is he?" "Yes," Garrett said before his father could finish. "Yes, we're together, and before you say anything else, you should know that Jake is the best ranch manager the Double M has ever had. He's brilliant and hardworking and loyal, and I'm lucky to have him, both professionally and personally." My throat was tight. No one had ever defended me like that, stood up for me like that. I'd spent my life braced for rejection, for disappointment. Having Garrett stand there and claim me in front of the one person whose opinion he'd spent his life trying to earn felt like something momentous shifting into place. Samuel stood there for a long moment, his jaw working. Then he turned and walked out of the office without another word. Garrett sagged against the doorframe as soon as his father's truck pulled away. I went to him immediately, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I don't know." He looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. "I just came out to my father, and he left, so probably not okay, but also kind of relieved. Is that terrible?" "No," I pulled him into my arms, holding him tight. "No, it's not terrible, it's human." We stood there for a long time, holding each other in the doorway of his office. Eventually, Garrett pulled back and wiped his eyes. "I need to get back to work," he said. "We have that hay delivery coming this afternoon." "Garrett, I know I should probably sit with this or process it or whatever, but right now I just need to work. Is that okay?" I understood that impulse. Sometimes the only way through something is to keep moving. "Yeah," I said, "that's okay." That night when we were alone in his house, Garrett was quiet. We sat on the couch together, his head in my lap while I ran my fingers through his hair, and he stared at the ceiling. "My mom would have understood," he said suddenly. "She was the kind of person who saw people, you know, who cared more about whether you were kind than whether you fit into the right boxes. If she'd lived long enough for me to tell her, she would have been okay with it." "I wish I could have met her," I said softly. "She would have loved you." He turned his head to look up at me. "You're exactly the kind of person she would have wanted for me, someone genuine, someone who sees me." "I do see you," I said, "and I like what I see, all of it." He reached up and pulled me down for a kiss. It was slow and sweet and full of gratitude and something deeper that neither of us had said out loud yet. 2 days later, Samuel showed up again. I was in the barn checking on a mare who was due to foal when I heard raised voices from the office. My stomach dropped, and I headed that direction, ready to intervene if necessary. But when I got close enough to hear, I realized it wasn't an argument. It was a conversation. "Trying to understand," Samuel was saying. "I can't say I do understand, not fully, but you're my son, Garrett, and if this is who you are, then I want to know that person." I stopped in my tracks, not wanting to intrude. "You really mean that?" Garrett's voice was thick with emotion. "I do. I've had 2 days to think about it, and the truth is, you've seemed more like yourself these past few months than you have in years. If that's because of him, because of being honest, then who am I to stand in the way of that?" There was a pause. "I'm not saying it's going to be easy," Samuel continued. "I'm an old man set in my ways. I'm going to make mistakes, probably say the wrong things, but I'm willing to try, for you, because you're my son and I love you." I heard the sound of movement, then Garrett's voice muffled. "Thank you, Dad, thank you." I backed away quietly, giving them privacy. Later, Garrett would find me in the barn and tell me everything. We'd talk about how his father wanted to meet me properly, not as an employee, but as Garrett's partner. How this was just the first step in a longer journey. How there would be other people to tell, other reactions to navigate. But for now, I let them have their moment. 3 months after that night at the bar, the Double M was thriving, and so were we. Winter had settled over the Texas Hill Country, bringing cold winds and occasional snow that turned the landscape into something from a postcard. The cattle were healthy, the ranch was profitable, and Garrett and I had fallen into a rhythm that felt less like new love and more like coming home. We decided early on to keep our relationship private from the ranch hands, at least initially. It wasn't about shame. Garrett had proven his courage when he came out to his father, but about practicality. The Double M employed 15 full-time hands and another dozen part-timers during busy seasons. Change needed to come gradually, carefully, so the work didn't suffer. But keeping secrets, I was learning, was exhausting. It was a Tuesday morning in early February when things came to a head. We were in the middle of calving season, which meant long days and longer nights checking on pregnant heifers, assisting with difficult births, and making sure newborn calves were healthy and nursing properly. I'd been up since 3 a.m., had already assisted with 2 births, and was running on coffee and adrenaline when I walked into the equipment barn and found Marcus Chen, our head foreman, arguing with 2 of the younger hands. "Just saying it ain't natural," Joey Hernandez was saying, his voice carrying across the barn. Joey was 22, cocky, and had been with us for about 6 months. "2 men together, that's wrong. Bible says so." "Bible says a lot of things," Marcus replied, his tone carefully neutral. Marcus was in his 50s, had been with the Double M longer than I had, and was one of the most capable cowboys I'd ever worked with. "Pretty sure it also says not to judge." "I ain't judging," Joey shot back. "I'm just stating facts, and if I ever found out I was working with one of them," he used a slur that made my blood run cold, "I'd quit on the spot, wouldn't want that kind of perversion around me." The third man, Tommy Briggs, laughed uncomfortably. "Come on, Joey, ain't nobody here like that." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I should have walked away, should have let Marcus handle it. But 3 months of hiding, of biting my tongue, of watching Garrett measure every word and gesture in public, came crashing down on me all at once. "You'd be surprised," I heard myself say. All 3 men turned to look at me. Joey's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're working with one of them right now," I said, walking forward into the barn. "It means your boss is gay, and so am I, and if that's a problem for you, there's the door." The silence that followed was absolute. Joey's face went through several shades of red. Tommy looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Marcus just watched me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're full of shit," Joey said finally. "Am I? I was past caring now, past thinking through consequences. Ask the boss yourself if you don't believe me, but either way, you've got a choice to make. You can do your job and keep your bigoted opinions to yourself, or you can leave. But what you can't do is continue working here while spreading that kind of hate." Joey took a step toward me, his fists clenched. "You can't fire me, you're not the owner." "No, but I am." We all turned to find Garrett standing in the barn doorway. He must have heard the raised voices from the office. His face was calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. "Jake's right," Garrett continued, walking into the barn. "I'm gay, we're together, and if that's a problem for anyone here, you're free to collect your pay and go. But if you stay, you'll treat us with respect, the same respect you'd show any other couple. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them." Joey looked between us, his face twisted with disgust. "This is sick. My daddy worked for your daddy, and he'd be rolling in his grave." "My father knows," Garrett interrupted, "and he's fine with it. So unless you've got something productive to contribute, I suggest you make your choice." For a moment, I thought Joey might actually take a swing at one of us. But Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between Joey and us in a deliberate move that spoke volumes. "Might be time for you to move on, Joey," Marcus said quietly. "There are other ranches, other jobs." Joey spat on the floor, a gesture of contempt that made Garrett's eyes flash with anger, then turned and stalked out of the barn. We listened to his truck start up and peel out of the parking area. Tommy shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. McAllister, I don't have a problem with it, just so you know. I was raised to judge a man by his work, and you two are the best bosses I've ever had. So, yeah, I'm staying, if that's all right." "Thank you, Tommy," Garrett said, his voice rough with emotion. "I appreciate that more than you know." Tommy nodded and headed out, leaving just the 3 of us. Marcus looked at Garrett, then at me, then back at Garrett. "How long?" "About 3 months," Garrett admitted. "But Jake's right. I've known about myself a lot longer than that. I was married, I was scared, I was a coward." "You're not a coward," Marcus said. "You're a man who is trying to survive in a world that doesn't make it easy. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you two found each other. You've both been dancing around something for years. Nice to see you finally figured it out." I blinked. "You knew?" Marcus smiled. Jake, I've got eyes. I've watched you watch him for 3 years, and I've watched him watch you back. Wasn't exactly subtle, at least not to anyone paying attention. He clapped Garrett on the shoulder. I'll talk to the rest of the crew, make sure everyone knows the score and that harassment won't be tolerated. Most of them are good people, they'll be fine with it. And the ones who aren't, he shrugged. Well, we're hiring season anyway. After Marcus left, Garrett turned to me. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both, I admitted. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was wearing off. I'm sorry, I know we wanted to do this more gradually. Don't apologize. He closed the distance between us and pulled me into his arms right there in the barn, in full view of anyone who might walk by. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of pretending. If this is how it had to come out, then so be it. At least now it's done. I held on to him, breathing in the scent of him, soap and leather, and the coffee he'd drunk with breakfast. You sure about this? Because once word gets out, and it will get out, there's no taking it back. I don't want to take it back. He pulled away just far enough to look at me. Jake, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm not hiding that, not anymore. He kissed me then, slow and sweet and public. When we broke apart, I saw movement near the barn entrance and looked over to find several ranch hands standing there, watching us. My stomach dropped. But then Marcus started clapping, and one by one the others joined in, not mocking, not sarcastic, but genuine applause. Tommy whooped. Old Pete, who'd been with the Double M for 30 years, actually grinned and called out, "About damn time." Garrett laughed, the sound startled and relieved and joyful. He kept one arm around my waist as he turned to face our crew. All right, you degenerates, show's over. We've got cattle to check on and work to do, unless any of you have suddenly decided you need to find employment elsewhere. The hands dispersed, heading to their various tasks with backwards glances and smiles. Marcus lingered. For what it's worth, he said, Joey was a mediocre hand anyway. You'll find someone better. After he left, Garrett and I stood alone in the barn once more. He was still smiling, that genuine expression that I'd fallen in love with. So I said, I guess we're official now. Guess so, he kissed my temple. How do you feel about that? Terrified, relieved, happy, I looked up at him, mostly happy. Yeah, he said softly, me too. Word spread through the county faster than wildfire. Within a week, everyone knew that Garrett McAllister had left his wife for his ranch manager, that the Double M was now run by two gay men, that things were changing in ways that made some people uncomfortable. The responses varied wildly. Some of Garrett's old friends called to offer support. Others simply stopped calling altogether. We lost two major clients who'd been buying cattle from the Double M for years, both citing vague concerns about moral values and family tradition. But we gained 3 new clients, younger ranchers who made a point of saying they appreciated working with people who were honest about who they were. The feed store in town suddenly had a new cashier who would help us check out, after the old one made it clear he didn't want to serve us. The diner where we'd eaten lunch every Friday for years asked us not to come back, but the new brewery that had opened last month made a point of comping our meals and introducing us to other LGBTQ+ folks in the area. It was like the county had split down the middle, and we were caught in the divide. The hardest part wasn't the outright hostility that was easy to identify and dismiss. The hardest part was the subtle stuff, the way conversations would die when we entered a room, the invitations to social events that suddenly stopped coming, the way some people would look at us with pity as if we were something to be felt sorry for rather than congratulated. Garrett handled it with more grace than I could have managed. He'd lived his whole life in this community, knew these people, had grown up with many of them. Every cold shoulder had to hurt, even if he didn't show it. One evening in late March, we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when a car pulled up the drive. I didn't recognize it, a sensible Honda sedan, not the kind of vehicle most ranchers drove. A woman got out. She was in her late 30s, professionally dressed, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She climbed the porch steps with the confidence of someone who belonged. Garrett, she said. Melissa, Garrett stood, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. What are you doing here? So this was Melissa McAllister. Ex-McAllister, I supposed. I'd seen photos of her around the house before Garrett had packed them away, but meeting her in person was different. She was beautiful in an understated way, with kind eyes and a sad smile. I wanted to talk to you, she said. Both of you, actually, she looked at me. You must be Jake. I stood, suddenly nervous. That's me. Can I sit? Garrett gestured to one of the porch chairs. Melissa sat, and we settled back into our own seats, the three of us forming an awkward triangle. I heard, Melissa said after a moment, about you too, about everything. Who told you? Garrett asked. Does it matter? Small town, Garrett, you know how it is. She smoothed her skirt. I wanted you to hear this from me, not through the grapevine. I'm not angry, I'm not hurt. Well, maybe a little hurt. But not for the reasons you might think. Melissa. She held up a hand. Let me finish. I'm hurt because you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. We were together for 20 years, Garrett. I wish you'd felt safe enough to be honest with me. Maybe we could have figured something out. Maybe we could have ended things differently. I didn't know how, Garrett said quietly. I barely knew how to be honest with myself. I know, Melissa's smile was sad but genuine. I know, and I'm not blaming you. Our marriage it was what it was. We cared about each other even if we were never really in love. And I want you to know that I'm glad you found something real. I'm glad you found him. She looked at me. Jake, I don't know you, but I know Garrett. He doesn't do anything halfway. If he's with you, it's because you're someone special. So take care of him, okay? Because despite everything, I still care about what happens to him. My throat was tight. I managed. I promise. Melissa stood. That's all I wanted to say. I'll let you two get back to your evening. Garrett walked her to her car. They talked quietly for a few minutes. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw her hug him, saw him return it. Then she drove away, and Garrett came back to the porch. You okay? I asked. He sat down heavily. I don't know, that was unexpected. She seems like a good person. She is. He reached for my hand. I never meant to hurt her. I hope she knows that. I think she does. We sat in silence for a while, holding hands and watching the stars come out. Eventually, Garrett spoke again. My whole life, I thought being honest about who I was would mean losing everything. My father, my friends, my business, my place in this community. And you know what's funny? I did lose some of those things, but I gained so much more. Yeah, I squeezed his hand. Like what? Like you, like the ability to sleep at night without feeling like a fraud, like actual happiness, not just the performance of it. He turned to look at me, like a future worth looking forward to. That's pretty sappy, McAllister. He laughed. Get used to it. Apparently, now that I've accepted I'm gay, I'm also accepting that I'm a romantic sap. I can live with that. Good, he pulled me closer, and I settled against his side, my head on his shoulder, because I'm planning on being sappy for a very long time. Spring came to the Double M with its usual chaos. Calving season was in full swing, the pregnant heifers were giving birth almost daily, and we were working 18-hour days to keep up. But even exhausted and covered in various bodily fluids that came with ranch work, I'd never been happier. Marcus had proven to be invaluable in helping integrate our relationship into the ranch culture. He'd made it clear to every hand that discrimination wouldn't be tolerated, but he'd also given space for people to adjust, to ask questions, to work through their own baggage. Most of the crew had come around quickly. A few had left, but we'd replaced them with people who were either supportive or at least professional enough not to make it an issue. The Double M was becoming something different, not just in terms of who ran it, but in its culture. We'd always treated our hands well, but now there was an added layer of authenticity, of openness. People felt comfortable bringing their whole selves to work, whether that meant talking about their families, their struggles, their identities. We'd hired a young trans man named River who was studying agricultural science in college and needed summer work. He'd been terrified to come out during his interview, but Garrett and I had made it clear that he was welcome. River had turned out to be one of the best hands we'd ever employed, tireless, smart, and with an intuitive understanding of cattle that usually took years to develop. We'd also brought on Maria Gonzalez, whose husband worked in town but who wanted to get back into ranch work after staying home with her kids. She was a brilliant horsewoman and had started a training program that was bringing in additional income. The ranch was evolving, and so were we. One Saturday in late April, Garrett's father came up from Arizona for a visit. This time, he brought his girlfriend, a woman named Patricia who was warm and funny and clearly crazy about Samuel. We all had dinner together at the main house, Garrett and me, Samuel and Patricia, and Marcus, who we'd invited because he'd become more than just a foreman. He'd become a friend. Patricia was telling a story about Samuel getting lost in a supermarket when the older man interrupted her. "Garrett," Samuel said, his tone serious, "I need to say something." The table went quiet. Garrett set down his fork. "Okay. I've been thinking a lot these past few months about the expectations I put on you, about the life I pressured you to live." Samuel cleared his throat. "I was wrong. I thought I was doing right by you, thought I was setting you up for success, but all I did was make you miserable." "Dad." "Let me finish." Samuel looked at his son with eyes that were suddenly bright with emotion. "You're a better man than I gave you credit for, a braver man. And this ranch, what you're building here, it's something special, not just because it's profitable, but because of how you treat people, because of the kind of leader you've become." He glanced at me, "and I think a lot of that is because of Jake." I felt my face heat. "Mr. McAllister." "Sam," he corrected. "Call me Sam, and I mean it. You're good for him. You make him happy in a way I never saw with Melissa, and that matters more than anything else." Garrett's hand found mine under the table, squeezing tight. "So I wanted to say thank you," Samuel continued, "for taking care of my boy and for having the courage to be who you are, even when it's hard. That takes strength." "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. "That means a lot." Patricia raised her wine glass, "To new beginnings and old wounds healing." We all drank to that. Later, after Samuel and Patricia had gone to bed in the guest room and Marcus had headed home, Garrett and I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air. "Your dad's a good man," I said. "He's trying to be." Garrett kissed the top of my head. "That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be better than we were yesterday." "You're already pretty great. Only because of you." "That's not true, and you know it. You were brave enough to change your life long before I came along. I just happened to be here when you were ready." "Jake Harper, always so practical." "Someone has to be. You're off being romantic and sappy." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest against my back. "Speaking of romantic and sappy, I've been thinking about something." "Yes." "Yeah," I felt him take a deep breath. "What would you think about making this official? Not just living together or dating, but actually building a life together. All in, permanent, the whole deal." My heart stuttered. "Garrett, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together a few months. But Jake, I'm 42 years old, and I've never been more certain of anything. I don't want to waste another minute of my life not being completely honest about what I want. And I want you, I want this, I want us." I turned in his arms so I could see his face. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Depends." His smile was nervous and hopeful. "What do you think I'm asking?" "Sounds like you're asking me to marry you." "Well, that's not legal in Texas yet, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking. Maybe not right now, maybe not even soon, but someday. When it's legal, when we're ready, I want to marry you. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours and we chose each other." He cupped my face in his hands. "So yes, Jake Harper, I'm asking you to marry me, eventually, if you'll have me." I kissed him, putting everything I felt into it, all the love and joy and disbelief, that this was actually my life now. "Yes," I said when we finally broke apart. "Yes, I'll marry you, eventually, when it's legal, when the time is right." "Yes." "Yeah," I kissed him again. "I love you, Garrett McAllister. I think I've loved you since the day I met you. I love you too. He rested his forehead against mine. God, I love you so much. We stayed on that porch until the sun started to rise, talking about our future, about the ranch and what we wanted to build, about maybe traveling someday, seeing parts of the world beyond Texas, about growing old together, whatever that might look like. It felt like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of something that would last. Not everything was perfect. That would have been unrealistic, and Garrett and I had both learned the hard way that pretending problems didn't exist only made them worse. Our first real fight happened in late May during a particularly stressful week when one of our best bulls got sick and we had a major client visiting to evaluate our breeding program. The stress had been building for days, and we were both exhausted and short-tempered. It started over something stupid. I'd forgotten to file some paperwork that Garrett had asked for, and he'd snapped at me in front of Marcus and two of the hands. I'd snapped back, he'd doubled down, and before I knew it, we were having a full-blown argument in the middle of the barn. I asked you to handle it 3 days ago, Garrett said, his voice tight. And I've been up to my neck in sick cattle and scheduling and 1,000 other things, I shot back. I'm sorry I'm not perfect. I didn't say you had to be perfect. I just need you to do what you say you're going to do. Like you're so reliable. You were supposed to call the vet yesterday and you didn't, which is why we are now dealing with a much sicker bull than we would have been. His eyes flashed. That's not fair. Isn't it? We were both breathing hard, both furious, and I could feel the eyes of our hands on us. Marcus cleared his throat. Maybe you two should take this inside, he suggested quietly. Garrett and I looked at each other, and I saw my own frustration mirrored in his face. Without a word, we both headed for the office. Once we were inside with the door closed, the fight continued. You're treating me like an employee, I said, not like your partner. You are my employee, you're also my partner. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Aren't they? Because right now, it feels like you're my boss first and my boyfriend second. Garrett ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd come to recognize. That's not fair. I'm trying to run a business here, Jake. I can't let personal feelings interfere with that. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept being snapped at in front of the crew? Accept being treated like I'm incompetent? I didn't say you were incompetent. You implied it. We stared at each other, both of us angry and hurt, and not entirely sure how we'd gotten here. The silence stretched between us, thick with things unsaid. Finally, Garrett spoke, his voice quieter. You're right. What? You're right, I snapped at you because I was stressed, and I took it out on you in a way I wouldn't have with anyone else. That's not fair, and I'm sorry. The anger drained out of me. I should have done the paperwork. I said I would, and I didn't follow through. That's on me. We are both under a lot of pressure, Garrett said, and we're still figuring out how to balance the personal and professional sides of this relationship. It's bound to be messy sometimes. I sank into one of the office chairs. I don't like fighting with you. I don't like it either. He came and crouched in front of me, taking my hands. But maybe fighting is okay sometimes. Maybe it means we care enough to be honest instead of swallowing things down. Very healthy and mature of you. He smiled. Patricia lent me a book about communication in relationships. I've been reading it. Despite everything, I laughed. Of course you have. I want to do this right, Jake. All of it. The relationship, the ranch, the life we're building. And if that means reading self-help books and having uncomfortable conversations, then that's what I'll do. You're such a nerd. You love it. I really do. I pulled him up for a kiss. I'm sorry I snapped at you. I'm sorry I snapped first, and I'm sorry I did it in front of the crew. That won't happen again. And I'll get better about following through on things, even when I'm overwhelmed. We kissed again, slower this time, and I felt the last of the tension drain away. We should probably get back out there, Garrett said eventually. We have a sick bull and a client arriving in 2 hours. Yeah, but I didn't move, and neither did he. We just sat there for a moment, forehead to forehead, breathing together. I love you, he said. I love you too, even when you're a pain in my ass. Especially when I'm a pain in your ass. When we emerged from the office, Marcus took one look at us and nodded approvingly. Glad you two worked it out. Now can we please save this bull? Because I'm not excited about explaining to Mr. Henderson why his favorite stud might not be available for breeding this season. We saved the bull. The client was impressed with our operation. Life went on. But that fight taught us something important. We weren't going to be perfect. We were going to mess up, say the wrong things, let stress and exhaustion get the better of us. But as long as we kept talking, kept working through it, kept choosing each other, we'd be okay. The Double Muzz annual summer barbecue had been a tradition for 30 years. Every July, Samuel McAllister had opened the ranch to neighbors, friends, business associates, and anyone else who wanted good food and good company. It was equal parts social event and networking opportunity, a chance to strengthen community ties and show off the ranch. Garrett had continued the tradition after his father retired, but this year would be different. This year, for the first time, he'd be hosting as an openly gay man in a relationship with another man. We don't have to do it, I said, as we sat at the kitchen table going over the guest list. We could skip a year, let things settle. No, Garrett said firmly. I'm not hiding anymore. This is our ranch, our life, our community. People can accept us or they can stay home, but we're not pretending to be something we're not. The guest list ended up being a strange mix of old and new. Some of Garrett's longtime friends had RSVP'd immediately, others had made excuses. But we'd also invited the new people in our lives, the owners of the brewery, a gay couple who ran a veterinary clinic 2 counties over, River and his girlfriend, and a dozen others who represented the community we were building. The day of the barbecue dawned hot and clear. We'd hired caterers and set up tables and a small stage for the bluegrass band that would play in the evening. Marcus had supervised decorating the barn, and it looked beautiful, string lights and wildflowers, and a banner that simply read, "Welcome." As guests started to arrive, I felt my nervousness ratchet up. Garrett must have sensed it because he found me in the kitchen and pulled me aside. "Hey," he said gently, "you okay?" "Just nervous. What if no one comes? What if this turns into some kind of protest? Then we'll have a lot of leftover brisket and a quiet evening with the few people who did show up." He kissed my forehead. "Either way, we'll be fine." But my fears turned out to be unfounded. People came, lots of people. Some were the old guard, neighbors and business associates who'd known Garrett his whole life. They were polite, cordial, maybe a little uncomfortable, but they were there. Others were new faces, people drawn by curiosity or solidarity or genuine friendship. The owner of the feed store where we'd been turned away showed up with an apology and an offer to give us our business back. The county agricultural commissioner came with his husband, a fact that had apparently been an open secret for years. Samuel and Patricia arrived mid-afternoon, and Samuel immediately started working the crowd like the politician he'd never been but could have been, making introductions and smoothing over awkward moments with the ease of long practice. But the moment that stuck with me happened near sunset. Garrett and I were standing by the food tables, taking a brief break, when an older woman approached. I recognized her as Betty Morrison, who owned a ranch about 15 miles south and who'd been one of Garrett's mother's closest friends. "Garrett," she said, "I wanted to talk to you." Garrett tensed. "Mrs. Morrison." "Now you call me Betty, you always have." She looked at me, then back at Garrett. "I need you to know something. When I heard about you and Jake, my first reaction was, well, it was what you might expect from an old woman set in her ways. I didn't understand it, didn't like it." My heart sank. Garrett's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "But," Betty continued, "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. About your mother mostly. Sarah was my dearest friend, and I know what she would have wanted for you. She would have wanted you to be happy, Garrett, truly happy, not just pretending, and looking at you now, seeing you with Jake." Her eyes were bright with tears. "You're happy, really happy in a way you never were with Melissa. Your mother would have loved that. So I wanted to say I'm sorry for my initial reaction, and I'm proud of you for being brave enough to live your truth." Garrett's voice was rough when he spoke. "Thank you, Betty. That means more than you know." She hugged him, then turned to me and did the same. "You take care of him, Jake. He's special." "I know," I said, my own voice thick. "I will." After she walked away, Garrett and I stood there for a moment, both of us a little overwhelmed. "Did that really just happen?" I asked. "I think so." He looked at me with wonder in his eyes. "Jake, I think we're going to be okay, better than okay." The rest of the evening was a blur of conversations, laughter, and music. The bluegrass band played until midnight, and people danced in the barn under the string lights. Garrett and I danced too, slow and close, while some people watched and others joined us. As the last guests were leaving, Marcus found us. He'd had a few beers and was more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "You two did good," he said, clapping Garrett on the shoulder. "This ranch, this community, you're building something special. Don't let anyone tell you different." "Couldn't do it without you, Marcus," Garrett said. "Yeah, well, someone's got to keep you two idiots in line." But he was smiling. "I'm proud to work here, proud to know you, both of you." After everyone had gone, and it was just Garrett and me cleaning up in the quiet darkness, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or hope, or just the simple contentment of knowing we'd made it through another test. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "That I love you, that I'm proud of you, that I can't believe this is actually my life." "Good thoughts, then. Very good thoughts." We stood there holding each other under the stars, and I thought about how far we'd come. From that night in the bar to this moment, it had been less than a year, but it felt like a lifetime, like we'd been reborn into something better, something truer. "Come on," Garrett said eventually. "Let's go to bed. Tomorrow's another long day." "Tomorrow's Sunday. We are supposed to rest." "Are we?" He turned me around and kissed me with intent. I had other ideas about how to spend our Sunday. "Did you now?" "Oh yes, very detailed ideas. Want to hear them?" I laughed. "I'd rather you show me." Hand in hand, we walked back to the house, leaving the mess of the party behind us. It could wait until tomorrow. Everything could wait until tomorrow. Tonight was just for us. We should have known it was too good to last. In early August, a scandal broke that rocked the Texas ranching community. One of the largest operations in the state, the Broken Arrow Ranch, was revealed to have been systematically mistreating its cattle, falsifying organic certifications, and bribing health inspectors. The story made national news, and suddenly every ranch in Texas was under scrutiny. Thanks for watching.